Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fairview Discipleship Podcast. I am your host, Darla Scott, and I am joined today by Chad and Sharon Freeman. Today's topic will be on marriage. You know, isn't it fitting this month? This is the month of love, about relationships. What a better topic than marriage. And that's what we'll be focusing on today. So yes, today we will have an interactive discussion on marriage from a biblical perspective, what God says about it. We will focus on three main points. The first one being the foundation and the purpose of marriage, what God intends, the roles and the responsibilities in marriage, and communication and conflict management for a healthy marriage. So before we begin, I want to welcome Chad and Sharon again. So good to have you here, and I want to take a moment before we start for you to tell us, our listeners, a little bit about yourself and how long have you been married?
Hey, thanks for having us. We're glad to be here.
Been married
Go ahead.
24 years? Almost 24 years.
It'll be 24 this upcoming June. We dated for 6 years before that, so nearly 30 years of our lives together.
Known each other since we've 8.
Yes. So we got to know each other when we were little, playing Little League. I would always play ball against her brother, and then we would be on the same all-star teams together, and then our families would go to these all-star games and all-star tournaments together, and so we kind of got to know each other from the time we were 8, 9, 10 years old.
Yeah.
And then in high school, I went out on a limb and asked her if she wanted to go out on a date. We were 16 at the time, and luckily for me, she said yes, and then that's how it all got started.
That's how it all started.
Dated through the rest of high school, throughout college, into our careers. When we left college and I started teaching, she was actually working first for
Construction company.
Yeah. And then after a few years working there, she was able to come on at East Surrey as well. So we've probably been working together for 18 years at the same place.
Although we never see each other. We rarely
try to have lunch together each day, but during the day, don't see each other a ton.
What a beautiful story. Yeah, I didn't know that about you. So I'm glad you shared that because I learned something today. So good stuff. Yes, you have. That's wonderful. What a blessing, you know. God has really blessed that. So, so today there are many scriptures, passages on love, on relationships, marriage, and how God desires for us to live them out. But we're going to start at the very beginning with God's creation and His design for marriage. So let's begin with reading Genesis 2:23 and 24. The word says, "The man said, 'This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man.' That is why a man leaves his mother and father and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." So, Chad, I want to begin with you. Can you explain to our listeners, to us today, and further define what God's marriage covenant really looks like after reading this passage?
Well, when you start from the very beginning, it's all about relationships. And even from the very beginning, when God made man, when He made Adam, it was about communion and relationships together. And in His infinite wisdom and love for us, He doesn't want us to do this life alone. He wants to have someone for us to be able to share with, to lean upon, to support. And then if you kind of fast forward that to the future, so many times within Scripture, the relationship between us and God, between Christ and the church, is used in an analogy with weddings, with a marriage. Christ is the bridegroom, and we the church are His bride. And so I think God has always had a purpose for us to have someone, first and foremost, to have Him, but then on this earth, to have somebody to share this life with. Lots of times people look at it as it's a covenant. To me, covenant is an agreement. It's a promise. It's not just like a contract. A contract is transactional.
Yeah.
It's many times emotionless. It's just one party does this, another party does that. But a covenant is personal.
Yes. So glad you said that. It's so true. That covenant is precious, yes, and we'll talk more about that. Reflecting on marriage in the marriage covenant, I feel, our society today either does not understand what the marriage covenant is or has shifted away from the seriousness of the covenant. I believe, many in our society view marriage as a contract, as you said, rather than a covenant. Sharon, in your words, can you explain the seriousness of the marriage covenant, what it means to you? You guys have been together for a long time. Just what this means to you, the seriousness, and how that it should be adhered to.
Oh gosh, that's tough. That is tough. Help me out here. Help me get going. Let's see. It's like Chad said, just to have someone to do life with, but to lean on.
Yeah.
We bring out the best in each other.
Yeah.
We bring out the worst in each other. He loves me. He doesn't always like me sometimes. I mean, it's how it is. But you need support,
Yeah.
and you need. He helps me, and he actually does help me in my walk with the Lord. And I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling. That's a tough question to answer.
No, I think you got it. Again, in this covenant, it's relational.
It's not one-sided.
It's not one-sided. We obviously love each other and have developed that love over many, many years. And it's hard to love something if you don't know something.
Oh, yeah.
And so through many years of getting to know one another and building upon that relationship, the love just continues to go deeper and deeper. And I love her now more than I ever have. And I know in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, if I'm lucky enough to still be around, I'll love her more then than I do now.
Right.
You appreciate that. As you get older, you appreciate more.
Yeah.
Because, of course, support. She supports me more than I could ever ask for. I've got a very tough job, not only as a teacher. I'm the athletic director at our high school. I'm a coach at our high school. And I was actually talking with someone the other day. They said, if you're going to coach or if you're going to be an athletic director, you got to have an understanding spouse. And I said, I'm blessed beyond comparison with that, because I couldn't do my job as a coach, knowing the long hours I have to put in, the time away from home that I have to miss, if not for her.
Right.
Working at the school together, she does all of our data stuff. So when we look at eligibility for kids and if they've got the grades or if they've got the attendance, I mean, she has a unique perspective that she knows all of the background paperwork stuff that I've got to deal with, and the time consumption, the games that we have to attend, the practices, the travel, and having that unique perspective and being there with me at school. She's always been 100% supportive. You come to a baseball game, probably 80 to 90% of the time, you're going to find her in the concession stand working, because that benefits the kids and it volunteers and it helps to raise funds for the program.
But I also know he does it more than just for the coaching. He cares about wins and losses, but he also cares about making better men to send out into the world.
That's right.
So
your mission is just
there's a mission there too. So.
I've always felt like teaching and coaching has been my call to ministry.
Yeah, there you go. I love it. That's so good. So when we look at this covenant, then Chad, why do you think people have shifted away from that and fallen in more of the contract idea rather than a covenant idea?
I mean, it's easier.
Okay.
Again, if you think of something in the context of a contract, again, it's just transactional. And then if you're not happy, like if we were joking about cell phones before we got started recording. Hey, if I've got a certain cell phone company, I'm not happy with it, I can just break that contract and go hop to a new cell phone company. And for some people, they can do that with relationships. And if you have folks that aren't grounded in faith and they aren't connected to Christ, you may end up having them only look at it in that regard. As far as their relationships, they don't view it as a covenant. They may not even understand what a covenant might be.
That is so good. Yeah. So this thinks about before they get into the marriage, how important I think counseling is, how to understand, what are you really getting into? I think some people just get into it quickly and not thinking through it,
Well, and we had a friend, Marius, Robin Zimmerman, who was a minister.
He was a youth minister. And still is.
Still is. And we had to do a couple sessions with him before marriage to really know kind of, quote unquote, what we were getting ourselves into, and lay it out for us and things like that. So that was.
And we were blessed at the time when we got engaged and were preparing for the marriage. We were both active in church. We were both going to church. She had actually just started as a volunteer leader with Young Life. A lot of people don't realize this. Sharon Freeman is the first volunteer leader for Young Life of Surrey County, which is now Young Life of the Foothills. And she was the one that drew me into that. And then so we were actually Young Life leaders first for Mount Airy, because that's the first place that they had it. And then we were able to actually start a Young Life chapter at East Surrey, and then from there it grew to North Surrey, and the Foothills, they encompass Stokes County and try to spread it to West Stokes. And we did that for probably 3 or 4 years.
3 or 4 years, until we had Derek.
And then,
it got
once
really
we started
hard with
having kids, then it was harder to pour into that, but we continue to support Young Life and
now
donate,
Derek's
and
leading in
our son is actually a Young Life leader
at Cary
at Cary High School,
Raleigh.
Awesome.
So
I'm learning a lot.
Yeah, because luckily for us, because we were grounded in faith at a younger age, it wasn't as big of a deal for us to go through that counseling with Robin, because we kind of already felt like we knew what we were getting into. But with his guidance, because he had already been married for a couple of years, he could talk us through things. And obviously, until you go through something, no matter what it is in life, you don't truly understand it.
That's true. So true. Yeah, that's good. Absolutely. Yeah, so Sharon, in what ways do you see our society defiling the marriage covenant?
Ooh, lots of ways. That's uncomfortable to talk about in church.
I know, and we're just being right out here with it, but yeah.
Just the, not judging, but like infidelity and maybe kids out of wedlock and things like that. That's the biggest two that I see. And divorce, I mean, that's, I won't say a small one, but there have been times when he's made me want to, hit my head against the wall or something, but you talk about it and you pray about it and you work through it, and
That's right.
you don't just give up.
There you go. That's good. Absolutely. When we see the high divorce rate in the United States, it's pretty high, and the growing acceptance of cohabitation. So what role do you think the church plays in these issues? What role does the family play in these issues? I'll go with you, Chad.
So in those types of situations, obviously I think the church, our role in it is to try to just model what is right. And I think this is actually a bigger topic for anything that you deal with in life. As a church, we try to model correct behavior. We try to model Christ-like behavior. We don't turn people away from coming through our doors if they are cohabitating, or if they have gone through a divorce, or if they've committed infidelity, because at the end of the day, we were all sinners, and we've all messed up, and we all are fortunate enough to have the grace that comes from Jesus and His sacrifice for us. So you're not accepting, you're not tolerant of that, but I'm no better to point that out to someone else than when I stub my toe and I say some words I probably shouldn't say, because that does happen. We all have our own faults. I do think, though, if you show love, if you show grace as a Christian, if people see, if you're living it out and they see that, something's different, why do you want to go to church on Sunday mornings? What is it you're getting out of this? Why is it that you're, doing Bible studies with some colleagues at work, or that you've got your kids going to youth group and doing certain things? What is so special about that? And I think, that opens doors to be able to have conversations.
That's right.
Which then gets into the relational aspect of, hey, well, I can tell you, this is what Christ has done for me. This is what he's done for our family. This is how we've been blessed. Come see for yourself. Yeah. And then that open invitation. And then it gives other people a chance to get to know who Jesus is and how our Heavenly Father loves us in spite of our shortcomings, in spite of our flaws. So again, I don't think obviously we want to promote or be accepting of things that we know that are wrong, but you still don't turn people away. You try to model the behavior as best as possible and hope that that you can be a good influence and a good example to others.
Show God's grace. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one.
That's big.
In many walks of life.
Yeah, there you
Show
go.
grace.
It goes with everything. That's right. Yeah. So, hey, you're raising teenagers, young adult. Okay. So, and you're working in teenage atmosphere. So, how do we raise our children today to honor what God has established in that marriage covenant? How would you say? What are some key factors there?
Example. Lead by example.
I hope that our boys see in our walk in life that how much we love each other, and how much we show forgiveness to each other, because we do mess things up, and every couple's going to do it. It doesn't matter who you are. We hope that they can see that we're trying to instill in them the right values. We also know that they're humans, and as teenage boys, they're going to mess up. When that happens, from us in a parental perspective, there's going to be some consequences. Not because we're trying to be mean, but because we're trying to make sure that they're doing things right. There's also going to be forgiveness, and there's going to be an arm put around them and a hug and let them know that we love them. They have a lot of pressure on them today, which not just our boys, like all children, all teenagers have pressure on them today, and it has just gotten worse throughout the years in many different ways. There's more accessibility to things, whether it's drugs and alcohol, whether it's inappropriate things that they can easily see on TV or in the movies. Internet, of course. Internet has made life really easy and really great in some ways, but it's also caused a lot of damage in other ways. And the other thing as well is, I think you talk about, hey, some of the maybe unintended consequences that might happen. Let's say that they get into a sexual relationship as a teenager, and then maybe they end up having a child and becoming pregnant. It's a beautiful thing. Children are wonderful, but there's a maturity that needs to be there, because you're responsible for raising another human being, another life. And so I think you have to have those tough conversations of, this is what it was intended for. It was intended to happen later, when you're more mature, when you found that someone that you know is right, that you want to begin a family with.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And y'all are just right in the midst. That's a wonderful mission. You're there to teach, you're there to working in the school system, but also to witness, to be a witness, and people see. I think we don't realize how much they do see, our example. Yes. Even what your walk in the school system, Yeah, absolutely. So how do you explain this in the passage, to becoming one, in practice in the marriage relationship, in the practical day-to-day relationship?
Well, yesterday was Valentine's.
Yeah,
and
there you
it
go.
was, and I'll go ahead and tell you, to becoming one, my day consisted of, I had baseball practice in the morning, because we also have a lot of multi-sport athletes, and we're still in the midst of basketball season, so I was able to get some of those guys to come in. Our youngest son Jackson had driver's ed. Yeah. She goes and drops Jackson off at driver's ed, and then runs to the grocery store to pick some food up for us to be able to cook a meal for Valentine's. And then once we finished up and got him back from driver's ed, we took off to Winston and went to Sam's to get food for the concession stand for baseball.
There you go.
And that's silly, but it was nothing to her because she knows that's a part of my life and a responsibility that I have, and it has to be done. And she didn't do it begrudgingly. She said, "Well, come on, let's go." And we hopped in the van and we headed down and we loaded up and took it by the concession stand and put the drinks in the cooler and put the food up. And again, it's selflessness. It's her knowing that that's a responsibility that I have and helping me to fulfill that. And she does it all the time. And then if we've got laundry, I'll run and grab some dirty clothes and take them downstairs and throw them in the wash because she needs laundry done. You have to find ways of picking each other up and helping each other out and showing support.
And it can be the simplest little things.
Simple things, yeah. You don't
Simple things, yeah.
exactly, and how much that's appreciated and working together to make that that union. That to make it easy, to make it what God wants. So
Knowing what one needs to
yeah,
be able to survive. Yeah.
And in a crazy way, the two becoming one. Obviously, we became our own family, and we're very blessed that we've got great in-laws. I mean, I get along wonderfully with her and with her family. She gets along wonderfully with mine. I feel like her parents are just as much my parents as in-laws, and she feels the same way about my folks. But yet, we intentionally chose to buy a house in Pilot Mountain. My family lives in Siloam, Copeland area. Her family lived in Mount Airy. We wanted to be close to them, but we wanted to have distance.
There you go.
Because we were building our family.
Right.
And yet, we still can rely on them.
Yes.
And they can rely on, if they need something from us, I can drive to Siloam, I can drive to Mount Airy, I can help my father-in-law out with something, or my mother-in-law out with something, or my mom will call Sharon and see if she needs help with the kids, and that's has been beautiful for us. But
She goes with me to all the sporting events that our kids do. Yeah.
But we did make that decision very early on to have at least a small degree of separation, because we felt like that would work well for us to help grow into our relationship better together and take our family.
That's also how we ended up here. We didn't want to go to.
We wanted to be going to a church in somewhere in the area
In the
in
community.
the community where I was going to be teaching, and wanted to try to find a church that had high school kids, so again they could see us in church on the weekends, in addition to seeing us in the halls at school. And luckily, I actually had some family in the community, and this was one of the places we visited and fell in love with it, and we've been here for 23 years.
23 years, yeah.
So glad you're here too. Yeah, it's awesome. Absolutely. So I want to go a little deeper, and I know we get into some touchy things and subjects when we talk about this, but tell me, what is God's design for sexual intimacy in marriage? How do you see what God's design is?
You can
don't-
take that
oh,
one.
you didn't want to take
you,
that one?
You can take that one. You're a better eloquent speaker. You're more eloquent than I am.
So sex it's a part of life, obviously for procreation and children, but it's also meant to be emotional, and it's meant to be special. It's not it's taboo if done in the wrong way or talked about in wrong scenarios. And we're sitting in the sanctuary right now recording this, and you don't normally think about talking about sex in church, but I mean, it's a beautiful thing, and it was intended for a man and a woman to grow closer together. That just an intimate bond that is created, and it helps to strengthen the love and strengthen the connection. It's not supposed to be transactional. It's not supposed to be meaningless. And I think you could say the same thing about anything of the world. Hey, I could go get that quick high if I did drugs, or I could go get that ecstasy from having a sexual encounter. The exhilaration of maybe having a fling, or going with a random person that I've just met, and those are fleeting.
Right.
Sex is within a marriage is meant to help the bond grow. It's just meant to help the relationship grow.
Yeah, connection, emotionally.
Emotional connection, of course, the physical connection, but it really the emotional more than anything else, because that's something that you only want to share with this person that you love, and you're giving your life to. And then, of course, the beauty that comes from having children, and then being able to raise them and love them and see them grow and have their dreams and their desires, and to try to support them. And raising children's hard, but it's also the most rewarding thing that you can do.
That's exactly right. And and God's design was for it to be in that marriage covenant, and not outside of that. And I think that we see a disconnect there in our society today, How do we raise our children? I mean, you're raising teenagers, and how do we raise them to embrace that particular design as far as that sexual intimacy?
I think, it goes back to leading by example.
Yeah.
And having hard conversations with your children, hard and uncomfortable conversations with your children about, repercussions of those actions sometimes too, when you're not ready for it or prepared for it.
Absolutely. All right. Take a breath. We're going to jump to the New Testament, okay? So, and I'm going to read what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 6:14. He says, "Do not be yoked with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness?" He's talking about don't be yoked together with unbelievers. So, what specifically is Paul concerned about here? What would you say?
I definitely think from the biblical era when these words were coming out, if you're marrying a non-believer, then you yourself potentially are going to get corrupted by a different faith. This was a time period when there were lots of different polytheistic religions, or there were numerous other religions that were out there, and we see it even dating back to the Old Testament when the Jews were the only ones believing in the one true God, and yet you had lots of other folks that were believing in multiple gods. As the Jews did intermarry with some of those different tribes and different peoples, it caused some of those Jewish people to fall away from their covenant, to fall away from their beliefs, and adopt some of those others. So kind of the same thing, if you're with a believer, then it's easier because you understand each other's background, and you also understand your faith and your belief in God. And you're able to both pour into a relationship, first your individual relationship first and foremost with God, but then that supports your marriage relationship. I actually think back, we did in our Sunday school group, I don't know, maybe about 6 months or so ago, we did a study on the Case for Christ, which was written by Lee Strobel. He, for those that don't know Lee Strobel, he was an employee. He was a writer, newspaper guy in Chicago, and his wife started going to church, and his wife became a Christian, and he was angry about it, and he felt like it was a cult. He felt like it was pulling her away from him, and so he was very detailed and fact-oriented, and he set out to prove that Christianity was wrong, and to try to show his wife that you need to stop going to this church and doing this thing. You don't be silly. And through meticulous research, his hardened heart changed, and he came to the both intellectual conclusion and then later the emotional conclusion that Jesus is real, and that Christianity isn't fabricated. He's a man of faith and is now a great missionary for Christ. So I think if you do get in a relationship where you are with a non-believer, the thing that we found out in our study was that while he was trying to disprove Christ, his wife was constantly praying for him to come to know Christ. And I would say that prayer is the first place to start.
There you go. The power of prayer, and I'm sure that's what drew him in and made a huge difference, no doubt. So, all right, well, I'm going to move on to the next section. From discussing the purpose, the role, and the responsibilities of marriage, and I want to begin with reading Ephesians 5:22 through 33. I think that this is a key passage that Paul talks about, and it's related to the role, the responsibilities of husbands. So I'm going to open that up here. Ephesians 5:22 through 33. So it says, I'm going to back it up to 21, but it says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and they care for their body, just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Okay, so we're talking about, Paul is giving instructions on how the functions and the roles of the wife, the husband, and how that all meshes together. First of all, I want to ask, one thing we must address is where people get confused or having difficulty understanding this concept of submission. All right, it starts out, submit to one another out of reverence. How do you define submission? What would you say?
Well, it's not referring in like a submitting to you that you're in a controlling way. It's, I think it's more of like commitment to you instead of submission, I guess you could say.
Right.
A commitment. I don't know, what do you think about me submitting to you?
I mean, if I'm always right. But no. So
See, we purposely didn't have this as a scripture in our wedding.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking.
That's right. She would not let that be.
Y'all just mark that one out.
But in all seriousness, if you understand the historical context, at the time, women didn't have the freedoms that they have today. Women, if any work that the women did, they were working within the home. They didn't have political rights. So I think in the true submission terms for this era, Paul's telling the wife, submit to the husband because he's having to make the political decisions, the economic decisions, those types of things. Yet the husband is told to treat the wife as it is himself. Jesus could have snapped his fingers and said, hey, everybody, you're going to follow me, and had the power to force everyone to follow him. But he didn't. He gave people free will and choice. He presented them with the facts. He presented them with love. He presented them with the sacrifice, but he still left it up to the people, the ability to choose him. And so husbands shouldn't say, hey, you're going to do this because I told you to do it. Right. Because that's not how Jesus did it. That's right. And that's very selfish. And if you are truly in love and you truly are trying to model that in a Christ-like manner, I think each partner is going to think selflessly. She's always looking to try to help me with things that I need. I'm trying to make the best decisions in the family and trying to help her, but it's to do what's best for her, to try to support her, to try to support the kids. So again, it does go back to the relational, the conversations, talking it out, and trying to make sure that you know each other's thoughts. You have a vision of what each person wants to do, and then go forward and what's going to be best for you as a couple and your family.
Yeah. Why do you think a lot of people have difficulty understanding this, or just it's like this concept of submission, how it's just a negative thought to a lot of people?
I think it goes back to just kind of like in history when people have been told to submit. It's been in a, I guess, what would you say, slave-like way. And so I think people relate it to that. Yeah. And that's why they have issues with this.
That's right.
And if you submit,
Yes.
you're giving up power. You're giving up
yes.
control.
And nobody likes to give up control.
Yeah, we live in a society that's all about that.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
just humans in general. Like, we like to control things. You know, how often do we maybe skip out on prayer, or things are going great in life? Hey, you know, I don't need to talk to you, God. Everything's good. I've got it under control, until things aren't good, and then oh wow, things are going south. I've got a bad situation at work. I've got a family member that's sick. I'm struggling with something personally. Hey, I need your help. Because we realize we're not in control. So I think submission, the context, negative context of it is the lack of control.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And you see, I mean, it's like, it says, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. He's included in this, It's just like husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. So it's that beautiful marriage of Christ and the wife and the husband that's all together there. And we see it, where else do we see it? We see it in Genesis, right? At creation. God created Adam, and then from Adam, Eve. So it's like that order was established from the very beginning, and it continues now, through this passage and in our marriages. Is the way the order is supposed to be. Yeah.
And don't forget, Christ is the head of the church. He dictates, he runs things. But yet, what did Christ do? He sacrificed himself for each and every one of us.
And he's the head and we're the body. We are connected to him. And yeah, I love that. Absolutely. So Chad, tell me how husbands can practically love their wives as Christ loved the church on a daily basis.
Take the trash down, do the dishes, do some laundry.
Do the things you don't want to do, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And, or find time to mute the TV or cut it off and talk to her. How was your day? What's going on? How do you feel? I think it goes back to finding ways of being selfless, of connecting, of knowing the person that you're with and that you love. Some people have different love languages. Some are more acts of service. Some are more focused on, physical love.
I'm a quality time person.
Okay, yeah.
And so making sure that you find ways of doing things to help support her, but also make life easier on her. So just
little things like going to the grocery store with me.
Or Sam's Club, right?
Sam's Club. Or Sam's Club. I mean, just little things like that,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Paul's description of the husband as the head of the wife, how does it align with gospel-centered vision of servant leadership that Jesus demonstrated perfectly, rather than a dominance? And I think we've talked about that as, that submission. But name some other things that you can think of that servant leadership.
It's all about communication.
Yeah.
Open communication, and realizing that you're not perfect either, and you fail at the exact same things probably.
There you go. Yeah, good. That's good. Yeah, looking at yourself. I think we have to examine ourselves, don't we? Absolutely. I mean, we're just as much as fault, but some people, can't see beyond it. But I love that. I love that answer. So here's another one. How do I balance my own God-given gifts and callings with supporting my husband in the same mindset?
Well, for example, I'm a behind-the-scenes person. I don't like attention. I don't like, this is out of my comfort zone right here. And so just, like helping him in the concession stand, knowing that it helps his program and it helps his baseball team and things like that. That's just one small, like, behind-the-scenes thing I can do to help him.
But I wouldn't say even me as a whole. Something that she's taken on over the past years. She started leading a Sunday school class. She kind of
out of my comfort zone.
Out of her comfort zone,
not a gift.
and yet she's grown and improved and gotten better, and it's been a blessing for those of us in the Sunday school class. So
Don't know about that.
again, her willingness to say, okay, yeah, I'll try it, even though I'm not a fan of it, and it's not something I feel like I'm great at, and yet she does the research, and I see her studying, and I see her ready to lead the discussion in Sunday school, and I think it's helped her also get even deeper with her relationship with Christ.
There you go. That's awesome. I love that. Yep. One more. How does our commitment to God change how we see our spouse?
Well, as we grow in our faith with Christ, we obviously see how undeserving that we are individually, and how many times we mess up, and in all the different ways that we mess up. So I think that if we have a God that is going to forgive me in spite of all of the stuff that I do wrong, how on earth can I, as a husband, not be willing to compromise, not be willing to offer forgiveness when she falls short, or vice versa? She offers me a bunch of forgiveness because I fall short all the time. And of course, you have those arguments on occasion. Every relationship does. But then I think with the discussion, you come to realize the perspective of the other person, and that the perspective and the original actions or whatever they may have been, most likely were done out of love, and many times the arguments are more from misunderstanding.
Oh yeah.
And then once you talk it through, then we both realize we messed up a little. Most of the time, we've both messed up together in different ways,
100%.
and
yes.
offered each other grace in that regard.
Yeah, it takes spiritual maturity, don't it? I think what we have to realize that we're all sinners, right? We're in sin, but where our identity is now, that we're the ones that are the created, and He's the creator. So knowing who that we're in communication with, who we're tied to, who we're with, to learn how to even relate to other people, in a Christ-like way. So absolutely. It's good. All right. So now I want to move to that third portion of this podcast on communication and conflict in marriage. So we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here. So we know that we all are going to have disagreements, right? And even conflict in our marriages at times. I want to read some passages first, very briefly, about what the Bible says about communication. James 1:19 says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. That's one that gets me every time, Ephesians 4:32 says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. And Proverbs 15:1 says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. When we think about these passages, so how should we communicate with each other day to day and handle conflict in marriage? What do you say? What would your outline be?
First of all,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, first of all, you've got to be communicating.
I was going to say,
You
that's
gotta
what I was going
talk.
to say. Communication is key. That's right. Communication, and you have to listen.
There you go.
You have to listen, and you have to accept that you were wrong. And
Yeah, and that can be hard.
that can be hard.
I mean, I think we're all prideful at times, and sometimes we say things or we do things thinking that we're right, and then all of a sudden we realize we're wrong, and having the humbleness to come back and say, hey, I got that wrong. I'm sorry. Yeah. I was in the wrong. Yeah. Can you forgive me? Right. And obviously you try not to repeat those same mistakes. Yeah. But it does boil down to you gotta constantly be talking and seeing where the other person is at and how they feel and what they think. And the more that you have open communication with one another, it lessens the number of disagreements or conflicts. You're never going to get rid of them, but the better you are at constantly checking on one another, each other, then the more supportive you tend to be, the more that you can empathize with the perspective of the other person. Yeah. And even if you don't agree, you can at least see where they're coming from, and then you try to talk through it.
And it starts again with that selfless humility, that submissive attitude, you know? Yeah, that's good. Very good. So what advice would you offer to someone who feels that they're working harder in their marriage to get it to work than their husband or their partner is? What would you say? What would you say to someone, Sharon?
Who feels like they're working harder? Oh gosh, I don't know. Because honestly, I've never felt like I've worked harder at something than he has. If anything, I feel like he's constantly working harder at stuff. Because I can be temperamental and hot-headed, and so he, has to pull me back and ring me in sometimes. So I don't know how to answer that, in all honesty. How would you?
Well, I think if you ever felt that way, that you were working harder, take a step back and evaluate again to see if maybe are you really working harder, or is it more you feel that you're doing that, but yet you may not be meeting them halfway.
Yeah, focusing on the wrong things.
And there may be times where one partner is working harder than the other because maybe the other is more introverted. Perfect example for us, when we do tend to get angry or have a disagreement, my biggest flaw is I like to internalize. I like to shut down more. Okay, hey, let's get past it. Let's move on. We both made a mistake. Let's move on. So for me, it is harder to talk about it sometimes, even though I know that that's the key to getting through it. Just the way I'm wired, I kind of tuck it in. Whereas
and I have to hash it out.
Wants to immediately, hey, let's get through this. Let's talk about it. And she wants to be more extroverted in that regard.
Let's talk about it. Let's fix it, and then move on and learn from it, so we don't make this mistake again. Yeah.
What advice would you give somebody, say they're ready to quit, they're ready to give up, they're ready to just leave their marriage? What would you say if you were going to try to help someone?
First thing I would say is think back to when you first fell in love. What drew you to that person? Because that person is still there. You may have hardened your hearts because of lack of communication or disagreements or whatever it may have been over the past. But think back to when you first fell in love. What drew you there? And then
remember that life happens and it gets hard, and things get. You have kids, and kids go to college, and so you push things aside. And we used to try to take a trip, just the two of us, no kids. Even if it was just like a long weekend, just to connect, keep the connection there. But then you have two kids who are in college, and that gets a little harder to do. And so you just have to keep trying and remembering why you started, where you started, and why you continue to do what you want to do, or continue to love them. They're still the same person, like you said, but life is hard and it happens.
And then I'd say the other part to that too is, yes, remember how you fell in love, but then also have you asked God to be part of this discussion too? Are you seeking Him out to help in this matter, or are we doing it ourselves? Which sometimes we tend to fall into that trap of trying to control it ourselves. So bathe it in prayer. Ask for God to find ways of help me find a crack. Help me soften the hardened heart. Help me to help me to help my spouse see where I'm coming from. Help me to see where they're coming from.
Yeah, you're talking about prayer. I mean, absolutely. Describe the importance of prayer and getting into your spiritual disciplines as a married couple. How important that is to someone out there that is struggling in their marriage or whatever.
Well, I think I'll be the first to say that we can all improve on our prayer life, and I know that there are times when I don't do as good of a job as I should, but you always try to find some point during the day to get alone, to sit down, and to communicate with God. And in doing so, you don't go to Him with a wish list. You know, that's not what prayer was intended for. Now, that's not to say we don't take our concerns to the Lord. We do. He wants to hear them. He wants to know. But it shouldn't just be hey, I need this, I need that, I need to do this for me, can you fix this for me? I think we go to Him first with appreciation, with thankfulness, and then include within that, thank you for my kids, thank you for my wife, help me with this, help me with that. But the acknowledgement and the thanks need to kind of be there at the start before you get into turning over your concerns.
So good, yeah. All right, we're going to wrap it up, but I want you to tell us, name 3 pieces of advice you would give somebody that's a newly engaged couple. 3 things that you tell them.
It's going to be hard. It's rewarding, but it's going to be hard.
First piece of advice I would give is make sure that you've found a spiritual home. Find a church where the two of you can kind of connect and grow.
There you go.
So start it there. But then also find one way of doing something daily to make life easier for your partner.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
And again, I think if you start small, start with one thing.
Right.
And then find a way every day to find out something new about your partner. And which it gets harder as you get older, because you feel like you've been around so long that you can read each other's minds or finish each other's sentences.
Yes. Oh, this has been so good, so good. So I want to wrap it up now. First of all, thank y'all so much for being part of this, and I've learned a lot about you guys, and I'm sure those people out there that's listening today have also, and it's been wonderful. First of all, I think we've covered many aspects of what a Christian marriage should look like in God's eyes. We've seen the roles, the responsibilities in the marriage covenant. We've talked about how to have a God-centered communication and demonstrated grace and love. Some lessons I think that we can take away today for our listeners out there is a Christian marriage should reflect Christ. Marriage is a covenant that is binding, it's faithful, and it's permanent. Marriage places God at the center with the husband, the wife, and God working in unity, all 3. Marriage is intended to grow closer to God and fulfill a godly mission. And a healthy Christian marriage should pray together, seek God first, be quick to listen, and slow to speak. Avoid a blaming attitude and avoid criticism and contempt. And be forgiving and repentant. So I want to thank my guests today again and for joining me in this wonderful conversation. And I want to thank all of you listening today. I pray that you will follow God's example as dearly loved children and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave Himself up for us as a fragrant offering and a sacrifice to God. Until next time, may God bless you.